Billing Guidelines, How Your Law Firm Increases Compliance and Profitability. I want to introduce today's first speaker, Gabriela Estures. She is the co-founder and president of Belfield. Gabby brings over 20 years of experience as a computer engineer in business technology consulting, software development, and systems integration. She has devoted her past 17 years to the legal technology vertical and has worked with over 100 law firms, including top 50 AM law firms, the largest firms in the world, such as Meyer Brown, K&L Gates, DLA Piper, Reed Smith, and Evershades, among others. Our next speaker is Jane Bennett. She is the founder of Global Legal E-Billing. With more than 2 decades of hands-on experience in implementing collaborative client and outside counsel solutions, Global Legal E-Billing founder Jane A. Bennett is a subject matter expert in the creation and deployment of collaborative case management, e-billing, and contract management solutions. Jane is currently leading the LOC's Disrupting the E-Billing Status Quo project focused on identifying issues in e-billing today and determining how the LOC can address these problems. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn this presentation over to these 2 ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, this is Jane Bennett. Hi, this is Jane Bennett, and I am our first person speaking here today. Our discussion today is going to touch on a number of different topics, all of them associated with Outside Counsel Billing Guidelines, the documents that you're getting from your clients related to how to manage matters and handle billing issues. Our focus for the discussion today is to talk about how you can better comply with your client's requirements and do so in a much more profitable situation for your clients. There we go. So we're going to get started with an introduction to exactly all the different facets that are involved with Outside Counsel Guidelines. And I thought I'd start with a little bit of history on how we got to the billable hour. Back in the day, in the early 1900s, lawyers would charge for their services by creating their own fee schedules. So they would decide how much they wanted to charge for any particular type of service, sometimes responding to the look of the person who came into their office. They looked like they could pay a little bit more, then they might charge a little bit more. If they looked like somebody that they didn't necessarily want to represent, they could then create a higher fee that they thought the person wouldn't be able to pay for. And there was really a problem in terms of the equal delivery of justice to people around the country. In the 1940s, they started to look at this in different ways to address it. And these management experts came to find out that attorneys who kept track of the services by hour were earning more than lawyers who did not. And they suggested that the way lawyers should go about setting a billable hour and charging for services by the hour would be to figure out how much they wanted to earn per year and how many weeks of vacation they wanted, and how much it cost them to run their law office in terms of expenses, staff salaries, overhead, all those things, run it through a formula, and that would end up being the cost of their billable hour. They figured that by doing something like this, then it would equalize the availability of legal services to people throughout the country, because you would be paying just for the hours that were worked by the attorney, not just based on some sort of number that somebody came up with rather surreptitiously. So let's talk now about the Outside Counsel Guidelines themselves. These are a much more recent device. We've seen them pretty consistently throughout the last 30 years, although today we see them more often even with clients that do not require electronic billing in order to indicate what the requirements are that need to be met by the people who are delivering their legal services. It's an attempt really to put on paper what are the terms of the relationship between the parties so that there are no misunderstandings. It evens the playing field when it comes to the outside counsel guideline, outside counsel who are providing services to the client. But what we've seen is that there can, in fact, be two different versions of the billing guidelines. One that might be in place for preferred firms who have a much more important relationship with the client base, and sometimes there's a separate set for the rest of the outside counsel panel. But the important takeaway from this slide here is that it really is an attempt to set expectations so that everybody is on the same field. So let's talk about the anatomy of these documents themselves. Starting on the right-hand side of this slide, there are the billing guidelines. That's the money part that really impacts the people at the law firm and how your invoices are created. It can include instructions on all these different areas in terms of how your invoices need to be composed, what they need to be, what needs to be included, the types of services or expenses that the client is willing to pay for and reimburse your firm for. The other portion of these documents deals, first we can see processes and procedures. In many cases, these are the expectations of the client in terms of how their litigation needs to be managed. And then also there's information on the client's policies, the terms of the engagement, and any other requirements they have, for example, on cybersecurity, other compliance terms, confidentiality. We see them often including information and requirements in terms of speaking to the media on behalf of the client and that sort of thing. So these documents go across an entire host. Really is, at the very least, 2 separate documents, if not 3 separate documents. And very often they're just all combined together. So let's talk about why electronic billing and auditing, how this first came about to begin with. There was a situation that existed. Most people have never even heard of the Alliance case, and I find that understanding what it is that went on in this particular case helps you to understand why we are where we are today. So in 1986, there was a claims adjuster working for Alliance in San Diego, or Alliance Insurance Company, and he was just paying attention to his caseload. His claims were in the state of California, and what he noticed just in the course of every day doing his job is that his cases all seemed crazy, that they were these little nothing claims that seemed to just litigate out of control, and they had all these depositions and there were all these experts, and it seemed like minor injuries, but there were all these medical expenses, and the plaintiffs would never settle. And going into on the eve of trial, they would, make some sort of highball offer, and then these plaintiffs would settle their case. He noticed it in California, not just in his particular area that he was assigned in California. So in working with his manager, they started an investigation. And what they found was this scheme that had been put in place by a number of plaintiffs' attorneys. What started it all was a law that was passed in California that said an insured has the right to select their own counsel, that instead of just having the insurance company select the counsel that would represent them on their claim, the insured could do it. So these plaintiffs' attorneys got out. They hired people to get into accidents. You're in a traffic jam, you step on the brakes real short and somebody hits you from the rear end. Oh, gee, your back hurts. Wow. Well, we need to send you for physical therapy, and then, you know, you're on disability from work. We've all heard of stories about cases like this, but this actually happened. The end result from their investigation was that more than 200 attorneys were accused of stealing approximately $200 million from a series of different insurance companies. And in the end of it, there were multiple criminal convictions and civil settlement for the defrauded companies. I think this is a very interesting case. You can see a snippet of it at this particular website, but also if you, I know that when I first heard of it, I searched for the case on Westlaw, and I was able to get a great deal of information on the background of this case. I found it really fascinating because it is a way for us to now understand why these documents exist, these outside counsel documents exist, why auditing and e-billing actually came around, and also why insurance companies seem so convinced that they are being cheated and want to do what they can in order to watch their legal fees. So we're going to talk about some statistics and trends. So we've got a number of statistics here, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. Collection and realization, while it's ever so slightly up, law firms are getting 85% of what they submit in billing on average today. Law departments themselves have indicated, as we've heard since the economic decline in 2008, that they've had to do more with less. And they have focused to whatever extent they possibly can to become more efficient with their processes and with managing legal spend. 80% of law departments say that enforcing billing guidelines is either effective or highly effective in terms of managing their legal spend. And I like this one at the end. So not only are realizations down, but we find that on average, attorneys are billing 156 fewer hours than was charged just 10 years ago, and that equals $74,000 per lawyer per year. Some more statistics. Law departments are now being more careful than ever in terms of identifying what they consider to be unnecessary work. This idea of the billable hour hasn't quite panned out the way people thought it would. As it turned out, they find that there is too much or overwork or unnecessary work, writing, rewriting, redrafting going on. And that equates to about 46,000 hours per year per law department of unnecessary work. Focusing on legal spend itself, e-billing has been identified as the second most desired technology in law departments that have not yet implemented e-billing. 40% of law departments, of law firms, I said that backwards. For law firms, at least 40% of their clients require them to e-bill. And on average, law firms are supporting at least 13 different systems. I can tell you personally, I've done surveys where I've seen firms report using 61 different client systems. And managing all this work, when you consider it in the course of a billing month, this is a lot of work to be done. Also, our last statistic here, the cost of this to law firms. In 2015, it was reported that large firms are spending on average $190K, medium firms $50K per year, and small firms, even a small firm is spending $12,000 per year. Let's see, whoops. Okay. So next, and this is the most important takeaway from these statistics, every time you touch a time entry, every time you rerun a draft bill, every time your invoices are rejected and require correction, every time a non-compliant invoice line item is adjusted, it's costing your firm money. You should be focused on trying to get 100% acceptance and approval of an e-bill on their first submission. So let's talk about some of the challenges with these billing guideline documents themselves. First, let's talk about the workflow. As we go into client negotiations and terms are established, then the matter begins on the work. If your time entry is put into the system without any sort of rule validation, well, that involves a lot of editing your pre-bills and also additional editing to your invoices, which are then submitted if it's electronic billing, could be subject to rejection, and then we go through this cycle over and over and over again until finally the payments are indicated and perhaps the write-offs occur at that point in time. This is not an efficient process. This is one that I'm sure each of you who are attending this webinar who work for law firms understand is just very, very frustrating. The time that's spent fixing pre-bills and invoices and rejected invoices is something that really is out of control, and with more and more clients requiring e-billing, there really isn't enough time in the course of a work month to get all of these things corrected. So let's talk about some of the challenges we face with these documents. First off, let me say, many of them are really, really poorly written. They can be very challenging because as you read from page to page to page to page, they say the same thing over and over again, and sometimes they say it ever so slightly differently. So you're not really sure what it is the client wanted in the first place. Many of these documents are extremely long, and to the extent that it includes the litigation management information in addition to the billing guidelines and the client policies, well, it's hard to figure out what's what. It's just all mixed in there together. Where billing is concerned, we have explicit rules in terms of what the client will or will not pay for that are very straightforward. But then there are also hidden rules. Sometimes they talk about something vague like, we expect continuity of staffing. Well, your people in the billing department, once they start receiving rejections on invoice submissions, understand that somewhere there's a count of the number of attorneys for appear and attend on a specific day that's actually causing a rule to fire. And because this is not expressly written in the guidelines, these hidden rules can be very, very difficult to discern. In addition, so as I say, very, very difficult. You've got your fee and disbursements where you need to itemize your expenses, and things like travel restrictions can cause all kinds of issues with recording time. For rejections, we know that law firms experience rejections at a rate of 5 to 35% of invoice submissions, which is unimaginable to manage. And then in many of these systems that allow appeals, there's time limits that are in place, but also, you know, you very often received approval for some of these things that were written down, and then you have to go through the process of filing an appeal in order to get your money. So these all go into play when it comes down to having less and less money available for your firms to operate. The impact to your firms is threefold. On the lawyers and fee owners, you know, they'll agree with anything the client says, just about anything when it comes time to agree to take a book of business. You've got your CFO or your director of finance that is really responsible to making sure that the firm has enough money to run smoothly and meet your expenses. And then we have the billing department, which basically has poor tools, and there is not a good understanding of the hurdles that you have to jump through in order to get your invoices into the system to begin with. I can tell you that every time I've talked with a law firm attorney who's come to me as a consultant looking for solutions to help out their billing department, they always start off the conversation with, people in my billing department tell me this is more difficult than I give it credit for being. And I always laugh and say they are exactly correct about that. So we're going to talk about some best practices for dealing with billing compliance and also with e-billing itself. I read a lot. I've been in this industry for 24 years, and I collect a lot of articles and statistics and whatnot. I thought this particular article was one that was very good. This comes back from 2012. And without going into each one of these, be specific. What we mean by that is you should be itemizing by task so that people understand, or on the client side, exactly what it is that's going on with your invoices and each invoice line item. Be distinct. In this case, what we mean is how you craft your verbal time description or your expense description. What was done, who was involved, and why was it necessary? That is really important for the person who's reviewing your bill to understand. Cryptic or abbreviated time descriptions are not helpful and are likely to end up being cut by bill reviewers. A little bit further down, we have use the minimum billable unit. Now, this article actually came from 2012. And what they were saying is not everything takes 3 hours to do. When you're itemizing the work that's being done, you should have small time increment entries on your invoices. That seems to run counter to a newer device that we see in Outside Counsel Billing Guidelines today, where clients are saying we won't pay for de minimis time, meaning that if you've got a 0.1 hour time entry, they're not really interested in that. They think that for the most part, if there wasn't substance performed during that 0.1 hour, they may not end up paying for it. So that's one we might be able to argue about. But to the extent that you have support functions or lawyers' time, you should be very careful about how you're billing it so that it's fully understood and you're only billing it appropriately under the guidelines. So if the client says they won't handle something, then you're not actually submitting it to them. And then finally, review your bill before sending it. This is a requirement that I see in almost every outside counsel guideline that I've looked at, that the attorney in charge should in fact have reviewed this invoice before it left the firm. In the days of e-billing, that becomes a little bit more difficult, but if it prints out on a paper bill, it also prints out on an e-bill. Those invoices are reconstructed in the systems that your clients are using, and it should in fact be as good quality and have received the same amount of attention as any brief that's filed at the court. We suggest creating outside counsel guideline summaries because those documents are very unwieldy. And from my perspective, this is the information that when we're talking about billing requirements that should be noted. What is required or what is permissible by the client? What requires approval by a client professional in order to be submitted? What is absolutely forbidden? What are the hidden rules? That's something that only your billing department is going to be able to discern. And then what are the stop words? Stop words can fall into two categories. It could be the entirety of a verbal time description that isn't allowed, like attend meeting. Well, that doesn't say who you met with and what you discussed. But it could also be just a particular word that you can't use. These forbidden words kind of make me crazy, because all it does is force us all to grab our thesaurus and become a little bit, better in terms of coming up with another way of saying exactly the same thing. There's some more information on best practices. This comes from both Gabby and myself. Establish a policy. Forward your client documents to a centralized resource at your firm. Everybody knows when a check comes in, it has to go to the accounting department. Well, everybody should know that when a client outside counsel guideline document comes in, it should go to this particular person. Or if somebody's in a meeting and they hear a client talk about the idea that they may, in fact, start an e-billing implementation, that person should be informed right away. That source should then create a centralized repository within the firm's CMS for all these original client documents and make them available to all parties at the law firm in a read-only fashion. Redundancy is very important. You should have a subject matter expert for each system or client system, and you should have backups trained. It's very important. The last thing you want to do is to lose a key resource, whether for temporary illness or they've switched jobs, and there's nobody else who knows that particular client system and how to submit the invoices. This can put the firm in a very, very bad position. I actually worked with a firm like this at one point in time. They had gone 8 months without actually submitting any invoices to clients, and the partners were up in arms because not only were they having to kick in money to meet expenses, but they also weren't getting any kind of bonus at year end. In fact, they had to give the firm money to keep it afloat. For training and continued education, I suggest lunch and learns. People always show up if there's free food. And you can record these training sessions into small snippets if you want using webinar technology and make those recordings available within the same repository as your outside counsel documents. If there's something that you can see a particular person doesn't get, all you have to do is send them a link to the snippet, and then you've got personalized training for a specific problem. And lastly, you need to use technology to do the heavy lifting. Wherever possible, if you can take this off the hands of somebody who's actually reviewing the bill, then please do it. There are systems today that for either time entry or for your back-end office system that offers the ability to test time entries as they're being entered into the system. Not only does it ensure compliance with outside counsel guidelines, it also provides training to your people as they go through time entry. It's more efficient in the long run than having to edit these pre-bills and rejected invoices over and over and over again, and brings us, in fact, even closer to that idea of 100% compliance on first-time submission. And the last one I wanted to mention is this blog by Jim Beckman. He has, the name of this particular blog post was 10 law firm invoicing habits guaranteed to annoy your clients, reduce collections, and extend payment cycles. Now, there are a number of articles out there that talk about pet peeves from bill reviewer. I find them all very entertaining to read, but Jim, I think, really hit it on the head. These are all very, very common sense, and let me explain a couple of them. Be consistent. You should have the same practices across the entire firm when it comes to time entry. There should be no exceptions. What you want is ultimately to have invoices look as if they've been written by the same hand. Don't be annoying. Understand what sets off your bill reviewers. You know, if you take a look at their billing guidelines, you have a really good idea of what they find annoying. Billing for overhead expenses, one-time adjustments, unexplained rate increases, failure to comply with outside counsel guidelines, formatting issues. Electronic billing is designed to deal with exactly these things and to catch them because they are such pet peeves by the clients. Let's see. Don't duck and cover. Now, this is an interesting one. And this especially applies when you're doing paper billing. In the e-billing world, you know, you've got budgeting that a client might require, so your invoices are compared against the available budget as they're submitted to the system. Well, especially in paper billing, if you have an invoice that you're submitting that just is completely outside the realm of the expected budget on a matter, if it varies so completely off the scale, either in the client's favor or against the client, this should be explained before the invoice goes to the client. There should, at the very least, be a telephone call where the issues are discussed because something has happened. But also, you should consider adding those explanations into your time entries themselves so that the bill reviewers then aren't seeing something that appears to be completely unexpected to them. Especially like number 9, understand what happens after the bill goes out. Get involved with your clients and learn what systems they're using and what sorts of KPIs, how are they measuring the services that you provide for them. If you have a client that's considering changing systems, volunteer to help them. They're always looking for, you know, their key partners to lend them some assistance in terms of what works and what doesn't. And coach your team. You know, get everybody so that they understand that this isn't just a billing department problem. This is a problem for the entire firm, and it does impact everybody. Okay, and I am going to turn this over now to Gabriella.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Gabby Stures, co-founder and president of Belfield. And for some of you might know that in my prior life, I was also co-founder and president of eBilling Hub, which is now part of the Thomson Reuters family. And so Jen and I, we go back in the day, and this is a subject that we are very, very passionate about it. And as Jane mentioned, the problem with OCG, e-billing, and compliance is not getting any easier. So with the use of the right technology, this is the only way to go. So, and yes, indeed. The legal spend management vendors continue to develop and improve their technology to help the corporate legal departments to become more efficient at managing legal costs. So you get my point, right? And as you can see here in this slide, more recently, some vendors, I think this was like a mid last year, have announced that they will be incorporating technology such as artificial intelligence and machine learning for what? Guess, you guess, invoice review more efficient than ever. And as Jane mentioned before, 72% of legal departments already have the pressure to become more efficient, and 80% already seeing improvements in their cost of legal expenditures just by introducing slightly changes in the enforcement of their policy. So these efficiencies that we are talking about, they can be quantified. So in this particular case, with this particular technology, law departments with the use of this technology can achieve savings from 7 to 15%. How do we do it? How do they do it, actually? I'm going to show you, there are 2 examples in here that you cannot read, but I want to read it aloud because I find these to be fascinating. On the left-hand side, this is the view from the bill reviewer. Okay, and they point out the savings that the law department can achieve. Okay, and they are clearly stated. On the left-hand side, I'm going to read it because you cannot read it. It says participation at meeting call, suggested savings, $1,718.13. 4 lawyers attended on a client call on November 6th. Click to see if this is relevant and consider appropriate. Right? On the right-hand side, right, there is another bill reviewer savings alert. Administrative support cost, suggested savings, $945. A total of approximately $945 was charged for a time carrying out administrative work, including managing data, files, document. So remember what Jane mentioned a couple of times already about the hidden rules. So I have a client, I wanted to share this story. I have a client, and she told me that they had a bill, a $40,000 bill that kept getting rejected because administrative work. So about a month trying back and forth, they discovered what was the culprit. And it ended up being that they had a partner that in an entry, he was using the word database. And this is very relevant because that is the hidden rules that they don't tell you in the guidelines, right? And actually here in these suggested savings, right, you will see administrative work including managing data. That's where the database comes from, okay? So this is great for legal departments, right? Kudos to the legal departments. And but what's going on with the law firms? So I'm sure that most of you have seen this cartoon, and this is a great representation of what law firms are facing today regarding compliance. So for law firms, what are we doing, or what can we do to bring also these efficiencies to our law practice, right? And how do we get a fair shot at this? I have a client, he's a CFO, and he told me once, Gabby, we are so busy. We continue being buried with guidelines, new e-billing clients and rejections, and we don't even have the time to sit down and figure out how we're going to solve this problem. So relax, you are not alone, because realistically, there is almost nothing out there for law firms to help with the OCG and compliance, other than, you know, kind of like adding more humans to the problem. So how about we begin to solving this problem where it starts? And that is time entry. Since the billable hour, like Jane was mentioning, since the billable hour 40 years ago, we have mistakenly thought that time entry is an ugly screen that everybody hates and attorneys don't want to come close. But they have to do it anyways, or have someone to do that for them. In today's world, I want you to think the time card as the unit of revenue, and know as my transition. As the unit of revenue and not as a screen. So if there is no time card, there is no invoice, no billing, no collection, no bonuses. So how do we fix this then, right? In general terms, we fix this by improving and maximizing the quality of your time card inventory. Yes, inventory. For professional services, their inventory are time cards. So you need to be thinking that the health and quality of your time card inventory is what is going to generate greater returns, client satisfaction, and improve profitability. So imagine a world where every time card is validated for compliance against the client guidelines as the time gets entered, and this is whether the client is e-billing or not. And the attorney behind the scenes get recommendations how to better comply as he or she enters their time. So because let's face it, guidelines and rules are getting more complicated, and this is something that you are facing every day. And on the other side, I err on the side of the attorney. How do we pretend that an attorney can remember every single nuance? For one client, they require approval for research that is more than 2 hours. For another client, the approval is more than 3 hours. And for that reason, attorneys resort to our unsung heroes, the dealers and the legal assistants, right? This is not for me. I cannot do this, right? I just want to practice law. And of course, it's not like attorneys are averse to technology because they can FaceTime with their kids, right? And they can set a test. Is that there is no technology that help them work the way they work. So the question is, right, and you might be wondering, how do I create a better time curve inventory for my firm? How can I do this, right? So other than putting the best effort, on the attorney's side to enter time daily and trying to remember the guidelines, right? And adding more people to review invoices, I wanted today to talk to you briefly about the technology that exists today, and that's something that we are helping to bring to market for all firms of all sizes. And this is what we call OCG Life. It's a full management solution where time gets, remember, you can dream of a world where every time gets validated. So that's what we are bringing to law firms. And this is the area that we are really innovating. A full management solution where the time, as you have all your terms, you have negotiated, and as the time gets entered, the attorneys learn as they go, the time gets validated by compliance, and the rules are centralized to ensure business continuity. So therefore, you are minimizing the overhead to getting the invoices out so the firm can achieve shorter billing cycles and speed up your collection cycles and collections realization. Because as Jane showed before, right, this is where the money is, right? The delayed, you got a rejection because the timekeeper wasn't approved. Okay, now you have to wait 40 days, right? So even though that, I mean, you can argue that you're gonna get paid, right? All these setbacks, right, it's affecting the cash flow in the bottom line of your law firm. So how does OCG work? I'm going to show you guys a little demo so you can see how the magic happens and what this means to you. So the full OCG solution will help you in 3 main areas, which are the main areas of pain today, right? First, it's a centralized repository to manage your guidelines, to house your engagement letters, and to have a summary that everybody can read and is not in someone else's notepad, okay? So you remember that I talk about business continuity, right? So what can happen is all this knowledge that is in here, it's sitting in somewhere in your finance, accounting, and billing department, right? So if he or she wins the lottery, what happens, right? So they bring all that knowledge with them, and you have to start from scratch. And even though that, you might not know how much money you're losing because of that, you have to go to the drawing board, right? Start training the people and start from scratch. So like Jane said, right, we shouldn't settle with these efficiencies to be the cost of doing business, right? We need to aim at 100% realization and go back from the 80% where we are today. So, so it is the management of the guidelines, right? Is the ability to set up the intelligent rules and also help your attorneys and timekeeper to comply, right, and know what to do. Because what credit say, hey, this entry is bad, right? So the idea is said, hey, you know what? If you really want to get paid, right, don't use the word database. Use the word compile, or something like that, right? And then this is where the efficiencies are, right? As every time card gets entered, it's validated for compliance based on the complex rules, hidden rules, explicit rules, all of them. And at the end, right, so also the billers, they get help with some things that they need to fix that traditionally today they have to go through the preview and start sorting out, right? For example, hey, they're not paid, they're going to pay only 50% of travel time, right? How do they know that, right? They have to go to the preview, sort this out, make the discount, right? So in the part of the real-time compliance, it is twofold. There is a real-time compliance for the attorney and the timekeeper, and also real-time compliance for the folks in the billing department. And we talked about the rules. I want to give you a visual of what you're going to see in the brief demo, which is the scope of your guidelines and your rules. Okay, so you can set up your rules to be a warning, right? This is just a reminder, hey, you need to get the approval code, for example. And this is why every firm is different. So the success of the OCG Life, right, and increasing billing compliance, right, it's make this work for you because there is no one size fits all, even though that everybody has to go through the same vendors, and most of you get a similar set of guidelines. So you can define your rules to be a warning, right? So you can define your rules to be an error, which is definitely you cannot get this time in, right? So, you can put it in a placeholder, right, and fix it later. And the action, it's the list of the to-do list that the billing department has to go through and fix. So they're not eyeballing pre-bills and hoping for the best, right? So you have this type of rules, right? And in terms of a scope, you can set up rules at the firm level. Let's say that your firm is a big insurance defense, and you don't want block billing across the board, period, right? So you can set up rules at the firm level. You can set rules at the client level. Let's say, for example, I'm going to use the example of Liberty Mutual because, I feel like, a lot of firms are, client of theirs. And so, for example, you can set your guidelines for Liberty Mutual, right? But within that, you are doing litigation work. So you have 5 matters for litigation, and you have 20 matters for workers' compensation, right? So you can set the rule at the client level and also at the matter level. I hope this helps as we jump into a quick, visual and demonstration. How can I help my attorneys, my firm, to bring compliance without they even notice it, right? So therefore, right, increase my profitability and collection realizations, basically. So I'm gonna share my screen right now, and give me 1 second as we do the transition, okay? And so what you're seeing in here is the main, what we call the OCG Life management system, and this is the portal. On the left-hand side, and this is just sample data, Okay, so this is simple. There is no real data in here. Okay, but I just pick some popular clients, right? And what I wanted to show you, it's a twofold. Is the simplicity, how you get your rules, your summaries, and everything in there. And I'm going to show you what will be the timekeeper experience as he or she is putting their time anywhere, whether it's in a mobile device, put it in on a laptop, everywhere. So on the left-hand side, right, it's where you define your client and your guidelines, right? In this example, like I said, I have a Liberty Mutual and I have a set of litigation rules and I have a set of workers' comp rules. So and then I'm going to define the scope, right? You just click on that, right, and you just drag it and drop and say, if my client contains 5,900, then this set of guidelines are going to apply, right? So you can set up, again, at the matter level, you practice area, location, right? You just need to be careful and understand what you're doing. Okay, and we can help with that. So then we talked about the documents, right? So this is where you house and centralize all your guidelines, okay? And it is as simple as, you click on add a file, I'm going to select it, and boom, this is it, okay? So we have added technology. As these guidelines get updated, the responsible attorneys will get notified that there is a new set of guidelines, okay? So as best practices, Jane mentioned summaries, right? Imagine, right, that all your summaries, all what is really important, right? You don't have to go through 78 pages in the PDF to really get one page. And that is exactly how we help you, right? We either can summarize it for you, right? Or you probably already have it, but you have one place, one system to house everything. In this case, for Liberty Mutual, billing the quarterly, it's $5,000, and they have to use this format. This is the vendor that they go to, right? And some other details in here, okay? And lastly, it's about setting up the rules for compliance, okay? So in this, again, those are just sample rules. But I wanted to show you how simple it is to add and maintain a rule. Because what happens is, let's say that you had an invoice that it was never rejected, right? All of a sudden, you're submitting this, let's say, Serengeti, right? All of a sudden, you started to get the same bill, the same wording that it used to be approved before. Right now, you're getting rejections. Guess what, right? Probably as they bring in, as the e-billing vendors, right, and the legal expense management system bring efficiency, they made updates, right? So, and you only know about those updates when they're gonna reject a bill. So you need to have the technology, because this is a never-ending game, right? At the law firm side, right, we might not win it, but at least we have to play at the same level. So this technology allows you, as soon as something changes, right, you can come and in 20 seconds get this updated. I love to say, if you can buy in Amazon, you can set up your rules. So let me show you a sample of the rules that we have, and we're going to add a sample rule and see how this renders from the attorney or timekeeper experience. So we have a vague description. Please use more than 4 words. Otherwise, that will be considered vague description. So we have my favorite, the attorney clerical work. Do not use the word database, right? And for example, in this case, you can say the word, if the word description contains database, right? And you can add another criteria. Let's say if the timekeeper title, right, contains, let's say partner, right, then it's going to trigger the error, right? So what you see in here, this is the title of your rule, right? And this is the part where you're going to help the attorneys to learn. You're going to make suggestions to make them successful. So please don't use the word database. When you use it, it implies clerical work. Please use compile. Thank you. Right? So you can set it up as a warning. You can set it up as an error. All right? So, and then so we have travel time, no more than 215 characters. You can do validations by L code. You are using the wrong L code, excessive time for a task, right? And I'm going to create a fun rule, okay? And the rule is going to be, we love ALA, all right? So, and my error is going to be, right? It's not an error, it's an encouragement. Congratulations, ALA codes are the way to go, ALA, right? Thank you. I'm going to set it up as a warning, and this rule is going to trigger if the work description contains ALA. Okay, so this is how simple that is. So I have set up my rule, right? And now let's say that I'm the timekeeper. We made this rule enable, and I'm going to add a time card, right? So I'm going to add a time card for Liberty Mutual, right? I put my time, I choose my task and activity code, and I'm going to submit it. This little thing, Validate with OCG, is for us to do a demo, right? But the attorneys will do submit, right? And congratulations, ALA codes are the way to go. Thank you, ALA, right? I just did it, and you can see how real-time this is, right? So this is pretty much the experience, right? How it is, right? It is not invasive, and the attorneys will not even notice, right? So that will be the experience on the desktop, right? But I want to show you also what the experience will be if they're using their mobile devices, because the rules should not be constrained to a device, whether it's your desktop, right? So they should travel with you. So what I'm going to show you, so I have my Liberty Mutual matter, right? And, you know, I'm going to do, let's say, I'm going to say update database, semicolon, research. Okay, so I'm the attorney, I'm going to submit it, and let the fun begin, right? So what you're seeing in here, it's a, hey, please use more than 4 words in your narrative, otherwise it'll be considered vague description, right? And you can continue on, please don't use database, otherwise it's going to be considered clerical work, right? And you can continue. For research that is more than 3 hours, please enter the approval code. Now, of course, what I'm doing is try to force every single error. In real life, it's not going to be that way, but I wanted you to understand the simplicity, right? How you can make the complex really simple. And then they can save the entry, right, and fix it later. So that brings us to the end of our webcast. So we covered a lot of ground, all the way from the history to the billable hour to the technology, because what you saw today, we're already implementing machine learning and artificial intelligence to really be competitive and make the law firms competitive. So we went from the billable hour from 1940, 40 years ago, right, to how the technology is being used not only by the evil inventors and legal expense management system, but also what is available to you as a law firm.
Gabriella, we do have one question. Well, we've got another one, but real quick, we do have someone who's asking about budgets. So in your system, how does the lawyer deal with budgets?
You can set up a budget at the LCO level. Okay, so we are working on the technology. Like, let's say if you have a L150, it's $20,000. As the time gets entered, it's going to be for that particular guideline and for that particular client. It will be checking that the total amount for that matter has not exceeded the budget. For the matter for the task code has not been exceeded.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got another one that says, is this system linked to NTAP or DTE, or the same system can be used to enter times?
Yeah, this system integrates with pretty much any major system, including Elite, NTAP, DTE, ARAN, RIPI, and you know, time slips, PC Law, anybody. Yes.
Okay, great. And so we got one more question. How does iTimeKeep integrate with our time and billing systems such as RIP and Kingston?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a wonderful relationship with our friends at RIPI. The integration, it's in real time. Bi-directional, so when you enter a time card, it is validated for compliance, and as soon as it's saved, it's in RIPI Kingston. So the integration is out of the box, and get that installed takes about 60 minutes, and you guys will be up and running.
Okay, great. So is this the same platform as the iTimeKeep that's currently being used?
Correct, exactly, correct.
Oh,
and it's the same technology for OCG and for iTimeKeep.
Okay, great. Would the firm have to set up each rule for each player?
Yes, the firm, that's a very good question. So the firm will have to set it up per client, but we do offer a service, and this is one of the best lessons learned from my CFO, right? It's that we are so busy to even do it ourselves. So we provide a service. If you guys are so busy, Jane Bennett, the president of the Leads organization, with our customer success team, they're leading this service, so they absolutely know what they're doing to help you set up these rules, the summaries, and the guidelines.
Okay. All right, great. Does it integrate with time slips?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
In real time.
In real time. Okay, great. Are we responsible for building our own rule sets?
Like I said, you can, if you have the talent and you have the time, you have the technology that you can do it, but also if you don't have the way to get that just for the jump start, we help you guys with the initial guidelines, and you can even copy and paste the rules from one client to another. So after the initial setup, you guys are in a position to take it on your own, continue building rules and improving upon your guidelines and rules.
Okay, great. Can you import rules from Juris Time Billing into this particular platform?
No, we don't. And there is a reason for that, right? So the Juris rules are a lot simpler than what the OCG does, right? So if there is an appetite for that, there is a service that the law firm can use, and those can be brought over.
Okay, great. So we've got one more question. What about different rates? If there is a budget, but the rates are special, does the system register that?
The initial budget, it's in terms of hours, right, and the rate that is set up for that matter. So yes, so the whatever budget it is, right, it will be to understand, right, whether you're getting too exhausted, it is going to be based on the rates either by matter or the timekeeper. You can have a matter, for example, that has $300 hour, right, an hour, right? But you have 3 partners that they are 500, right? So we honor whatever rate hierarchy it is, and it's just the aggregated value that is going to be compared against the budget.
Okay, great. Well, we are actually beyond the top of the hour, and just for respect out of people's times, if you have some additional questions, we have posted the information for our presenters in the chat. You can save the chat. As a matter of fact, you can go up to File, Save Chat if you want to keep that information. And make sure you email or send a message out to Gabriella or Jane if you have some additional questions about today's presentation. And I'm sure they'll be more than happy to assist you and answer your additional questions that we were not able to get to here on today's webcast. Jane, Gabriella, would you like to say some additional things to end our webcast today?
I'd just like to thank everybody for attending.
All right. Gabriella?
Yes, thank you, everybody. You had a wonderful questions. And if you want to, learn more about, the technology and even learn more about the best practices, you can contact us at info@belfield.com or Jane Bennett at Global Legal Billing, and we will be thrilled to help.
All right. All right, great, good deal. Thank you so much. This actually concludes today's webcast. We want to thank our sponsor, Belfield, who sponsored today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at legalmarketplace.alanet.org. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with this link, and please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.